And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, our exclusive interview with President Trump's 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale, also known as the secret weapon who ran 5.9 million Facebook ads for Trump in 2016. His strategy for re-election amidst concerns about Russian meddling. Plus, Amazon finds its footing after a rough start with technical glitches on Prime Day. We'll break down early data on how many shoppers flooded the site and what they are buying. And after Netflix's earnings stumble, should investors be worried? Second quarter results from other big tech firms could fall flat. We will discuss. But first to our top story, it is no secret that President Trump ran perhaps the most successful social media operation in presidential campaign history. So much so that his then relatively unknown digital campaign head was elevated to running his entire re-election campaign for 2020. Now that the 2016 campaign has been accused of colluding with Russia, something the president denies, but on Tuesday admitted that Russia did meddle with the 2016 election. Brad Parscale worked closely with the likes of Facebook, Twitter, and Google to hone the campaign's digital micro-targeting strategy. One other company that he worked with, the one that sits at the heart of Facebook's recent data scandal, Cambridge Analytica. Earlier today, we sat down with Parscale for an exclusive interview at a Mobile Marketing Association event in Sonoma, California, to talk about the groundwork he is laying for 2020 amidst this Russia controversy. Take a listen.
Well, I think my focus right now is on the midterms. You have to understand for 2020, holding the House and growing our lead in the Senate is very important. To get the agenda of the president done so that we have a great platform for 2020, it's important to hold those seats. And I think that what you see is, from a campaign standpoint, us producing some supportive role in that. We're not taking a lead role in 2018, but we're taking a supportive role. We have money, we have options, we have content and creative and things we can do to help. We can help from a GOTV standpoint. We can help in other ways in several DMAs. And that's an important role for us right now is to make sure we can do everything from the president's campaign and from the committee that we can support them and to make sure we do everything to hold the House in 18. Knowing what you know now, what are some lessons you've learned? What will you be doing differently? Well, that's a deep question. What's funny in 16 was I didn't have a basis of information, so I came in with a clean slate, which I actually think was an advantage for me in a lot of ways.
You'd never run a campaign before?
Never run a campaign before. Well, I'd run a campaign, just never a political campaign. Lots of product campaigns, which are different. So there was a lot of gaps, and I had some great support. The Republican National Committee came in. I had Jared Kushner side by side with me on a daily basis, fighting the battles, and he was my boss and was great. I had Eric Trump also, who had we bounced a lot of ideas off each other. They were an amazing family, and I had the best boss in the world, a guy that's our comms director. He's our political director, and he was always leading the right direction. But I think what really I learned was, how important it is to understand the data. I knew that going in, but now I even know it more. To learn to ask questions from those who've had experience. I've been doing that even more now. I've been doing a considerable amount of reading and understanding past electorates going back hundreds of years. I've done everything I could to educate myself on anything that's ever happened. This will be a much more grinded out long haul for me as campaign manager. It'll be but I also believe if the president finishes what he's going to do by getting rid of the unfair balance between China and the tariff problems, if he continues to grow this economy the way it does, people's wages keep increasing, personal economies improve. I think as he continues to solve national security issues and make the world safer, I don't know if it'll take me a lot of work. It might actually end up being where I get to just drink Starbucks on Election Day.
You made 5.9 million Facebook ads last time around. Hillary Clinton made 66,000. Will you make that many again? This is for super, super precise micro-targeting.
Yeah. I don't know that answer yet. We have to see what the playing field is. Some days I wake up and I think that Facebook, Twitter, Google, all of them will maybe not play fairly.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe they decide that they want to make the API a little harder to do those things. Maybe, like right now, Facebook, It used to be that we could put an ad up in a few seconds. Now it takes a couple days. So it's really hard to put up 5.9 million ads when you can't use the API automatically.
And you recently met with Facebook executives.
I met with Facebook, and I brought up that as one of my items that I was very frustrated with. I went straight at them, and I said, this is a kind of a change that is biased towards us. Understanding how our technology works, you created a rule which made it more difficult for us to use that. That's a frustrating standpoint. So maybe they do take that away from us. I don't think in the interim we'll figure out a way to do what we need to get done. I think by that time, and I think right now, we have a popular president. He's more popular than he was on Election Day. He's the most popular Republican president in modern history. And I think that we'll see a successful candidate Trump in 2020.
It's ironic that you're frustrated by Facebook, given that some people believe Facebook played a critical role in winning the election.
Well, I've been very specific that I think Facebook's how we won. In a lot of ways. I think President Trump won. I think Facebook is that 0.1% that delivered his message. I think if Facebook wouldn't exist, it would have been a lot tougher. Facebook connected the country. It's connected rural America, cities, and people all across this country in different types of backgrounds. And it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was connect us all. I think Facebook also is a liberal company that maybe its management isn't, but it has an inherited bias, just like these other companies. It's based in a place that is probably extremely biased. I mean, I can see it today being up here talking to you. Northern California is not Eastern Kansas, and their employees have bias. And those decisions probably go into every line of code they write and everything they do. And that's going to be something they have to swap at and try to kill. But I will tell you, I do think Facebook, probably more than all the companies, is trying to kill it. The question you're asking me is whether or not they can crush that. And I don't know if they can. I think the inherent bias of those companies is significant. And I think it's up to me to be a person as a leader in our party and someone that's running the campaign to make sure that those companies are held accountable, that they do everything they can to try to kill those internal biases and to provide an even playing field for this country.
What about Twitter? How has your engagement been with them?
They did not contact me back from the letter that we sent. I have spoken to Mr. Dorsey a couple times. I do feel that company is even more squandered with bias. It's, I think the platform itself is not that useful other than putting out press releases and for the press to figure out what's going on in the country.
Also ironic, given that Twitter is the president's megaphone. And
no, that's what I said. It's great for press releases, but I do not think it's I explain it like this. Trying to convince somebody on Twitter of something is like going into a bar at 1:30 a.m. Right before they turn the lights on and try to sell somebody something. If you can do that, then you could sell something on Twitter. Facebook's much more like church on Sunday.
There's concerns about Facebook engagement and trust in social media. What are the digital platforms in 2020 that are going to matter most?
Yeah, I do think that YouTube from Google is going to end up playing a big role. I think as we see cable TV move over to internet-based kind of shows, the continued use of watching television and content on TV, on the internet, is a significant change from TV. And I do think YouTube will play a role, a larger role than it played in 2016. But
how so?
Well, I just think that where eyeballs go. Remember, eyeballs are finite in some ways, right? So you can only place them so many times. If you're watching Facebook for 4 hours this year, but next year you're watching 3 hours of Facebook, but 1 hour of YouTube, that changes. So we're going to monitor where eyes are going. I think YouTube continues and Google continues to work on that platform and make improvements. I think what Google's done to the search algorithm also to put YouTube results at the top, they continue to put a lot of focus and they understand the value of that platform. So we're watching it closely. We're using it for a lot of things now. We're using it probably more now than we even were in 2016, even this early out. So I do think it'll increase its role.
And how will you divide your budget between digital TV and print?
It's too early to make that kind of decision. I mean, you never know. I mean, YouTube could blow up and we're all watching YouTube on our phones and it skyrockets and it'll change my budget. When the day I have to make my budget decision and I make that with the team is the day I'll split that all up, and that might change hour by hour too as we see the data come in. I just hope that Google's paying attention to what Facebook and Twitter are doing. They're even a bigger company, probably more even biased, especially their CEOs actually invest their time and money directly in the races, where I think Zuckerberg has been probably better of trying to stay less biased in his own personal views. I mean, I think he has a view of what he believes a progressive America is, but I think he tries not to influence politics as much. I think Eric Schmidt and these other people directly try to influence it. I'll be curious to see if they're able to swat down the bias within their company and keep YouTube as a even playing field. I think right now conservatives are already starting to say that they've been shut out of YouTube. Videos are devalued within their algorithm based off some of the views within it. And conservative messages in America are important. There's still a lot of faith-based people in this country, and they believe in what that means, and I would hope that Google wouldn't cut any of that out.
You've been accused of crossing the line, of suppressing the black vote. You hired Cambridge Analytica. When you look back, do you think anything that you did...
I've been accused of it, or Bloomberg said...
Bloomberg wrote a story...
In a sentence that says it's not
quoting a Trump
me,
campaign official,
yes,
that there were attempts to suppress the black vote.
A anonymous Trump campaign official, right? Yes. So, no, I mean, that's just not something we did. Did we show negative ads? Yes. Did we have any kind of direct intention to suppress anyone's vote? No, I believe in this country people should vote.
You also hired Cambridge Analytica. Going back and looking at that, is there anything that you think you did with their help or otherwise that was unethical, that crossed a line?
No, I think the way we used Cambridge had nothing to do with anything they've been accused about. They mainly ran a polling operation for us. They provided some visualizations. They did other things. They were mainly staffed. They had taken a lot of the quality staff from a very operational standpoint from Governor Walker's campaign and a few others, and I wanted those staff members, and unfortunately, the way the contracts were all written between those staff members and Cambridge, I had to hire Cambridge to do it. One thing that's never been accounted for is that the $5 million that you see on the FEC line is actually a TV buy and not a data buy, and so they were actually paid less than $1 million for all their work on the campaign.
The President's Summit with President Putin yesterday, does that cast a shadow over what you're trying to do?
No, it does not. I mean, look, I think this is a successful president who's trying to make the world safer. Look, I can't speak about what the president is. I'm not in the White House, and I'm not privy to all that information. But I think what the president's doing is, as he continues to make this world safer, it'll be great for 2020.
But you have leaders in your own party saying this is treasonous, this is disgraceful.
No, we have rhinos within the party who say that. I believe that you'll see, and you'll long-term see, just like the president has done time after time after time, showing that he's right and he's making the world safer and making this economy better, and I believe in him.
The president is taking Vladimir Putin at his word that Russia did not meddle in the U.S. election. He seems to believe the president of Russia over the U.S. intelligence community.
You would have to ask him what he believes or he doesn't believe.
What do you believe?
I'm not going to get into what I believe. That's not what's important for me. My job is to support the president, and you would have to go ask him on that one.
So, as you work towards re-election, you're already working on this. You're meeting with the president, what, a couple times a week?
Yeah, I meet with him, call him.
How do you handle the special investigation as you approach?
There's a legal team that sits and works on all that. You know, that's not my goal. I think right now, if you see it, that most of America, and I think the data shows that this doesn't resonate with Americans. Very few people are connected with it. It has had no effect on the polling numbers, and the support of Donald Trump and President Trump has nothing but increased since this investigation. I believe America sees it for this fake story on collusion, and I've continued to say there was zero collusion. It's such a joke, at least from my part in the campaign, and I think I played a major role. So I just know it's not part of it, and I'll continue to say that any foreign entity that does meddle in an election, should be held accountable. But that's what the government's there to do. That's not my role. And yet,
the Trump campaign's message seemed to align very much with what Russia was also trying to disseminate. For example, President Trump in July 2016 saying, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find the 30,000 emails that went missing, which is the very same day that the Russians, according to U.S. intelligence, tried to access or hack into Hillary's
You'd have to
servers.
ask him that one on timing. Sometimes things in life, I don't know.
Did you see any evidence when you were doing what you were doing?
No, I didn't see anything.
Anything that seems suspect?
No, look, I don't have complete access to everything that's happening in the country. That's why we do have intelligence. I have not access to any of that stuff. But I will tell you that from everything I saw, it looks like there was no collusion. There was nothing that we did with them. We ran a legitimate campaign, and it was the right thing. We did everything the right way. And we ran a completely legitimate campaign. And it's unfortunate that some people just didn't like what happened. And so they have to make these conspiracy theories up to explain what they don't like in life.
Are you worried that Americans can be manipulated online by foreign powers? Does that concern you?
No, I think Americans are smart enough. I've never really believed that you're going to be manipulated into these thoughts.
Do you think that voters will still trust social media ads if you use them again?
You know, I'm not one to speak on what voters can and will trust me. That's a big question. I continue to think that using social media and using advertising for all businesses and all political campaigns will still be an important way to get people to show up to vote for Trump in 2020.
So, you know, going into the next couple of years is going to be a hard slog for you. What do you think is one thing that voters really care about that's not being talked about in the mainstream conversation?
I think that the media has completely so infatuated with so much of their conspiracy theory, they believe it themselves, and they just forget to notice that the economy is getting better, the world's getting safer. More people last month quit their jobs, I think, in the history of the United States, if I believe I heard that number right. And the reason why is because more opportunity than they've ever seen. And people are waking up every day thinking today life's going to be better. There's going to be a better chance for them. There's going to be better choices for their children. And when that continues to happen, I think Trump wins in a landslide in 2020. And if the press doesn't want to talk about it, it doesn't matter because people are going to wake up every day and they're going to feel it.
How do you, as his campaign manager, deal with the unpredictable tweets and a president that seems that he cannot be controlled, or maybe he can be? Can you control him?
I think there's one person that controls him perfectly. And that's himself.
Is it frustrating for you, though, as his campaign manager?
Look, there's days I wake up and I'm like, okay, why? But then I talk to him and then I'm always like, yeah. And by the time, even when the times I probably question it, he just continues to be right. I don't do that as much as early on when I had to learn. But, you know, he has a heck of a high batting average. And he's made himself into a beautiful family. He's made himself a very wealthy man. And he made himself president of the United States, and I believe he's solving these world's problems and this country's problems. And I believe if his style is the way that gets done, and my children have a better opportunity, then I will support it every day for the rest of my life.
And yet, on the back of this meeting with Putin, do you think he looks strong, or do you think he looks weak?
I think he looks exactly strong as the people he needs to. I think there's a small amount of this media that has a lot of power that likes to make the message the way they wanted to make it. And they think they can control it with their written word.
You were called the secret weapon in 2016. What's going to be the secret weapon in 2020?
Donald Trump.
That's not a secret.
It will be, because he'll come up with something new.
Will Trump win in 2020, and by what margin?
Yeah, I 100% think Trump will win in 2020. I'm not going to start predicting margins yet, but I like the question.
Our exclusive conversation there with President Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale. Very shortly after that interview, President Trump did retreat from his statements in Helsinki, saying that he does accept the conclusion of U.S. intelligence that Russia meddled in the election, but then quickly introduced doubt yet again on that very admission, saying it could be other people also. Lots to discuss. Coming up, we will go behind the scenes on some of these headlines you just heard with our very own Bloomberg reporter who's been covering Parscale's rise. This is Bloomberg. Top Republican lawmakers attacked one of the legal protections most prized by social media companies. They're questioning whether Google and Facebook should be held liable for content posted by users. House Judiciary Chair Bob Goodlatte asked the companies why they should be treated differently from hotels who face legal responsibility for illegal actions on their properties. Well, the controversial role of social media in the 2016 presidential election is one of the issues we raised in our exclusive conversation with Trump's 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale, who ran the digital side of the president's first campaign. For more reaction, I want to bring in a reporter who was intimately familiar with that winning presidential bid and wrote the book on the man who basically held Parscale's now job back in 2016, and that is Steve Bannon. Josh Green is the author of Devil's Bargain and a reporter with Bloomberg Businessweek. So, Josh, I know you've been listening to that interview with Brad Parscale. Anything about that surprise you, especially given the events of the last 24 hours?
Well, it really did. I mean, what jumped out to me, what was fascinating to me about that interview was the degree to which Parscale seemed intent on basically bullying Silicon Valley tech companies like Facebook, like Twitter, like Google, saying that they're riddled with bias, and essentially trying to appoint himself or Trump as arbiters of whether or not they are actually biased. I think if you look forward over the next year between now and 2020, that we're going to see a lot of pressure from Republicans, from the White House, trying to get these tech companies to bend to their will. That was really interesting to me.
Give us a sense of how tough this guy's job is, given a president who perhaps can't be controlled, who, retreats from his statements and then casts doubt on them in the very same sentence.
Well, I think it drives a lot of staffers crazy. I don't think it drives Parscale crazy. He's worked with Trump all along, very used to rolling with the punches. If you hear the adulatory praise that he gives to Trump, that's the way Trump likes to operate. And Parscale is certainly somebody that Trump trusts intimately. Trump surprised some of his senior White House advisors when he announced that Parscale was going to be running his re-election campaign several months ago. But I think that shows you how much faith he has both in Parscale, in his ability to work and manipulate social media, and to run an organization that surprised everybody the last time around when Trump won the White House.
Now, Parscale did testify behind closed doors to the House Intelligence Committee, but he told us that he has not been contacted by Robert Mueller. Does that surprise you?
It does surprise me, if only because Mueller has been so thorough in the range of Trump intimates that he's interviewed. But, on the other hand, maybe Mueller is still going to call him. Maybe Mueller doesn't think that he was involved in, whatever area of investigation they think is most likely to lead to collusion, obstruction of justice, the sorts of things that Mueller's investigators are looking into. But in the meantime, I think Parscale is doing exactly what he said, and is preparing to run Trump's re-election campaign under a new set of rules that I think you heard him say in that interview are more difficult and more onerous, and it sounded like to me more frustrating for Parscale and Republicans to have to work through. But of course we know that is partly because these companies, Facebook, Twitter, so on, have been working so hard to get rid of the fake news and the propaganda that really infected our electoral discourse last time around.
And yet, in so many ways, the hand that fed and feeds. Bloomberg's Josh Green, thank you so much for weighing in.
Thank you.
Okay, much more coming up, including analysis and reaction to Amazon's Prime Day hiccups. Is it back on track to break records after glitches early on in the promotion? And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Shoppers are brushing aside the technical glitches that marred the opening of Amazon Prime Day. The world's largest online retailer says sales in the first 10 hours of the Shopathon grew at a faster pace than last year. Amazon says it sold millions of devices that work on the Alexa voice-activated platform. Joining us now in New York, we have JumpShot CEO Darren Baker. JumpShot delivers digital intelligence from the internet's most valuable closed platforms. And here with us in San Francisco, our Bloomberg Tech Senior Executive Editor, Brad Stone, and Jitendra Wawal of Bloomberg Intelligence. So, Brad, does it appear as if Amazon made a full recovery?
It does. Let me quickly tell you the ballad of the Instapot, this slow cooker. I tried to buy it like 5 times yesterday. I don't even know what it does. I was told to buy it because it was on sale.
I have one I haven't used, by the way.
Right. I don't know how to use it. Last night, the site went back up. I bought it. Apparently, my colleague Spencer Sober estimated that maybe Amazon forfeited about 99 million or so in sales. They're expected to sell about 3.8 billion for the 36 hours of Prime Day. So look, it was a black eye, not the way Jeff Bezos wanted to start the day, but I think they've recovered.
Jitendra, would you agree? A drop in the bucket?
Yeah, I think
5 Instapots in the bucket.
If you sort of compare it to other big releases and product releases, we do see these things happening, but it's not expected from Amazon. So definitely an unexpected event. But if you look at the numbers now, the early numbers, I mean, they're clearly going to hit the record over here, and it's going to show up in the 3Q guidance as well.
Now, Darren, you track 100 billion devices, and you're looking at shopper behavior. What did you see? How much did this glitch, as far as you can tell, hurt them?
we didn't see that the glitch hurt them too much. We think that they still had an incredibly strong start to the day, and we've also seen some really, really strong growth with some of the products that they've got, like their own private label products, Amazon Echo, the Amazon Fire Stick, and lots of other products like that.
So, Brad, what are the bright spots? Aside from just recovery.
The bright spots is, it's a big promotional day all around the world. They've turned Whole Foods into a very effective showroom, not only for Amazon, but for Amazon Prime. And, front and center on the Amazon website and the Amazon app are all these homegrown products, not just the devices like the Echo that we all know about, but all of Amazon's white label goods and home and beauty and furniture, everything else, look, and they've turned the doldrums of July into one of the busiest shopping days of the year.
I did speak to Amazon Prime Vice President Jem Sabay about Whole Foods in particular and asked, well, can you get consumers as excited about deals on chicken breasts and strawberries as you can on the Instapot? Take a listen to what he had to say.
I said at the time that we launched that this was our most important benefit launch since we launched Prime Video in 2011, that the adoption of Prime members to Whole Food benefits for the savings and for deals, and early signs also in the lead-up period to Prime Day has been truly phenomenal and very humbling.
How much, Jitendra, do you think this was a win from the Whole Food side of things on Prime Day?
See, if you look at the room they have in growing Whole Foods, they have 60 million plus Prime members in the US, a fraction of that actually shop at Whole Foods. So the fact that he mentioned it's the fastest benefit launch that they have seen, and it's sort of running ahead of their own internal targets, if you may, they have a lot of room to scale that. It's just, using some of these promotions and things like that helps them, but I think it'll be a longer tail in terms of like really scaling that business while maintaining profitability.
Darren, talk to us about the broader trends that aside from this particular glitch, what did it appear, what products won, if you will?
Yeah, I think a lot of those Amazon private label products won, but it's a really interesting trend. So what our data shows is that about 88% of those private label products are commodity products, like an Amazon Basics brand that sells batteries and products like that. Where there's still a lot of room for them to grow are those more brand-conscious products, like women's apparel, home furnishing, things like that. We've seen a strong focus on that, but we've also seen some really strong non-Amazon competitors make a dent in that market.
Brad, you wrote a book on Amazon, of course, and you've seen sort of the evolution of the relationship between Amazon and its third-party sellers. Do you think that this pushing of its own products, these batteries, baby wipes, is that going to alienate some of these merchants who are making their business on Amazon, or are they beholden to Amazon because it is Amazon?
Well, right. They have fewer and fewer options. But look, I think Amazon is aware of those optics. They actually just put out a press release trumpeting the number of sales by third parties on their platform. Amazon wins either way, right? This is the brilliance of the model, right? They have their own, their private label products, their 1P products that they store in their warehouses. But, this is the first place people go to shop. And Amazon increasingly has an advertising business where it profits in selling product placement, essentially, to these third parties. So, they want to send the message that this rising tide is lifting all boats today.
Jitendra, do we have any estimates on how big this private label business could be for Amazon?
So basically, we believe that it could cross $40 billion by 2025 conservatively.
By 2025?
Yeah, and conservatively. And the reason why we're saying that is if you look at the retail industry, the norm for any retailer to have private label of their own, own goods being private label is 15 to 20%. So if Amazon hits that target, and clearly with other retailers, they have sort of struck a balance between pushing their own products versus selling others. So Amazon could replicate, that model that the industry has followed for the last 2 decades. So I think that's their strategy from a margin perspective, because these are higher margin products, and they know what product categories they can push without upsetting the ecosystem much versus what they won't. So they'll be strategic about it.
They're also pushing categories that they've been historically weak in, like apparel and home furnishings. Are those categories that Amazon can do significantly better in?
Yeah, I think it'll be a slow start. Like furniture, for example, you saw it was been a focus for this Prime Day as well. Obviously, they are lagging in that segment, but apparel, they have done pretty well in a very short period of time. So what you end up seeing is like once they sort of focus on a few mainstream categories, and once those categories start hitting, saturation rate, consumer electronics being one, accessories and things like that, they will have to move into these other categories. So it's not a choice, it's not an option per se, but the pace at which they'll move will be a function of how can they do it profitably.
Darren, given the number of devices that you guys are tracking, who's Amazon's competition?
Yeah, they're back to the point you guys were making. There's some really interesting categories where Amazon is actually struggling. We did some analysis that showed that Macy's.com, which I think most of us would say is not nearly the e-commerce juggernaut that Amazon is, actually sells more Michael Kors, more Clinique, and more Calvin Klein branded products than Amazon. So there are these pockets of opportunity that brands and retailers out there can take advantage of.
Brad, Amazon added 4 new countries this year, including Australia. What's the significance of this on a global scale, given that Alibaba and Singles Day had first mover advantage?
Yeah, these are countries, Luxembourg, Singapore, the Netherlands were the other 3, where Amazon's business is nascent. Prime Day is like another avenue. It's another thing, another way that they can enter these new markets and raise their profile.
All right, Brad Stone, Jitendra Rawal, Bloomberg, thank you so much, as well as JumpShot CEO Darren Baker.
Thanks, Emily.
Well, Texas Instruments has ousted CEO Brian Crutcher over a breach of the company's code of conduct. Crutcher resigned after less than 2 months on the job. The chipmaker said the violations are, quote, related to personal behavior that is not consistent with our ethics and core values, but not related to company strategy, operations, or financial reporting. Crutcher's predecessor, Rich Templeton, will resume the role on a permanent basis. Coming up, after Netflix's disappointing results, there's likely to be more scrutiny for big tech firms reporting in the weeks ahead. Can the industry keep up with bullish sentiment after outperforming the broader market this year? This is Bloomberg. Netflix's disappointing second quarter report raised a big alarm among investors Tuesday as the shares tumbled as much as 14%, their biggest drop in 2 years. The results were seen as especially surprising because of Netflix's massive growth the last year, which showed no signs of slowing down. But overall, big tech shrugged off the news. The NASDAQ 100 index hitting a new record Tuesday. And looking at the bigger picture, you can see from this chart in the GTV library, large cap tech has easily outperformed the S&P 500 in the last few years. So, do Netflix's results signal that there should be more caution going into this earnings season? Here to help us answer that question, we are joined by Michael Purvez, Wheaton & Co.'s Chief Global Strategist and our very own Bloomberg Opinions, Shira Ovide. So, Michael, first of all, should the rest of the investment community be concerned about other big tech companies not living up to expectations over the next couple of weeks as they report?
Yeah, I mean, when you just step back for a second and you realize how important FANG is to the tech sector and how important the tech sector is to the overall market, anyone needs to sort of care about how their performance is going to be. I've been continuing to overweight tech, for a few years now, including this year, for all sorts of reasons. But having said that, right now, if you look at the FANG index on a market cap weighted basis, it's actually at a higher PE than it was back in late January before all the volatility erupted there. And the stock price is not the index level for the FANG is not quite as overextended above working support as it was back then, but it is it's certainly up there. So I think regardless of what you might think about the individual companies, it seems like right now, for the earnings season, for the other guys that are going to be coming later next week, it's really the stars have to line up pretty perfectly. So a lot of caution is going to be needed here. But again, longer term, I would expect that any dip in Amazon, in Facebook, and Google will be pretty aggressively bought.
Well, and Shira, there's still a question of whether Netflix's subscriber miss is a blip, is it a speed bump, or is it part of a longer-term trend?
Yeah, and the interesting thing was it wasn't just the weakness in the second quarter subscriber numbers. Netflix was also forecasting a decline in third quarter subscriber numbers and subscriber additions. And look, maybe the company is being conservative with its forecasts, seeing what happened with its second quarter falling shy of its own guidance. But it's interesting that we're talking about sort of two soft quarters in a row for Netflix, which makes it a little bit harder to argue the blip scenario.
Now, Michael, we had an analyst at Bernstein in a note saying crowded trades are typically already priced for perfection, and as such, the stocks don't react much to incremental positive news, while negative news has a much more pronounced effect. And yet we've seen these stocks run up and up and up, even in the midst of volatility around Facebook and controversy around the Cambridge Analytica data scandal. Even Facebook has bounced back. So what should investors be skeptical about?
Well, look, I think there's a fair amount of caution that's been coming with this rally since the Facebook scandal erupted back in late March. And you can see that in the options market. If you look at put-call skew for the NDX, that actually has as much stronger than it is for the put-call skew for the SPX, for example. Additionally, if you just look at the level of NDX volatility relative to VIX, it is in the that spread is in the top 10%, and it's been that way for some time. So what you're seeing here is that people are playing this recovery from the Facebook scandal, that rally, but they're going into it with a fair amount of protection, which I think is healthy, and may mean that whatever dips we get over the next few weeks out of earnings season are not quite as dramatic here.
That said, amidst the tech euphoria, if you take a closer look at the numbers of some of these companies, the valuations are still incredibly high. Take a listen to Rob Arnott, the CEO of Research Affiliates, earlier on Bloomberg Television.
Netflix and Tesla, my goodness, does any marginal buyer of Netflix or Tesla look at valuation ratios, or do they look at the story? I think in both cases they qualify as a bubble. Being a bubble doesn't guarantee that they'll underperform long term, but it makes it awfully likely.
Shira, are Netflix and Tesla in a bubble?
I mean, look, those are two stocks, and throw Tesla in there too, that have never traded based on their valuations, right? That either you believe those companies are going to be huge or you don't, and you apparently don't care what you're paying in terms of price to forward earnings or trailing earnings. So those three stocks, I think, are the exception. But if you look at companies like Microsoft and Google and Facebook, they're not terribly expensive stocks, in part because those companies have enormous earnings and enormous earnings growth and enormous margins, although the profit margins are coming down a little bit for those companies, at least at Google and Facebook. So those, some of the tech giants are really expensive, but not all of them.
And you summarized, Shira, Netflix as a religion, showing cracks in the foundation, and now people are asking questions about it. Expound on that further for us. I
mean, look, you put Tesla and Amazon in that religion bucket too. Either those are stocks and investment stories that either you believe or you don't. And the problem with those kinds of narratives, right, is if you have these data points like an earnings miss, it calls into question the entire belief of the faith system.
Could this religion analogy, Michael, be extended to other big cap tech stocks like Facebook, like Apple, like Alphabet, like Amazon? Yeah,
I mean, I think there's some nuances within all of these various sort of religious type stories. If you look at Facebook, you look at Amazon, Facebook in particular, but also Google, they have these kind of they've been awarded these sort of quasi-monopolistic high growth positions there. And certainly those positions sort of came into question back in March and April with the congressional hearings and so forth. But again, that risk factor seems to have faded pretty far from the landscape. If you look at a Tesla religion story, they don't have the demonstrated high margin, high earnings growth, de facto monopoly status. They're just a really exciting company making an exciting product there, but they've, obviously, yet to go free cash flow positive and to demonstrate consistent earnings growth. And I think there's a very large difference there. It may look on the surface like the same sort of cultish, maniacal type fervor with which supports those stocks. But the defense of Facebook's monopoly that's a fortress that's going to be very hard to untangle.
All right, Michael Purves with Whedon and Company and Bloomberg Opinion Share Ovide. We will be trying to untangle it over the next couple of weeks. Thank you. When we come back, what prompted all-star analyst Gene Munster to pen an open letter to Elon Musk calling him out for bad behavior? Munster joins us next. This is Bloomberg. In an open letter to Elon Musk, well-known Wall Street analyst Gene Munster says Tesla's CEO has been shaking investor confidence with concerning behavior over the last 6 months. He says, quote, "Your behavior is fueling an unhelpful perception of your leadership, thin-skinned and short-tempered." The Loop Ventures managing partner joins us on the phone now. Gene Munster, welcome back to the show. You or Loop Ventures don't own shares of Tesla as far as I know, so why'd you write this letter? Why go out on a limb like this?
Emily, it came from investors who we talked to about the Tesla story, and they felt it important that this message get out. And these are supporters who believe in Musk as a visionary, unprecedented leader, and feel that he has a great opportunity, but he is jeopardizing the opportunity. So that's why we have decided to take this step, is really so that the investors' opinion could be heard.
You list a few different behaviors you find concerning. Give us some more specifics. What is it about Elon Musk's actions over the last few weeks and months that concerns you most?
Well, it's been going on for about 6 months, and it kind of started with the outburst of analysts on this now famous March 2018 earnings call. But the frustration with short sellers, that's always a red flag when companies start to get in debates with short sellers, the broader media, this email exchange a month ago with the saboteur, and then it just simply crossed the line with the Unsworth message tweet earlier this week. And at that point, it had got to a point where it is, I think, jeopardizing some of the confidence in investors. And that's an important part of Tesla's success, is to have investors that are willing to continue to fund the company with capital, because it's a very capital-intensive business.
That was a tweet disparaging a critical person in the rescue operation of those young boys from a flooded cave in Thailand. You want Elon Musk to apologize. What exactly do you want him to apologize for?
I think it's really this last tweet is where the apology is necessary, because, as we said, that really stood out as inappropriate. But the apology is a first step. But what is the second and third step is taking maybe a sabbatical from Twitter, and also just focusing his energies on their mission, which is a great mission, which is accelerating the globe's adoption of renewable energy. That mission gets lost in everything that's going on. And his role, if I can just emphasize one more point, is particularly important because Tesla, to date, doesn't do advertising. So the potential consumer's opinion of the company is being formulated by how he engages with Twitter, which is not healthy at this point.
You're in an interesting position because, as an analyst yourself, you need Tesla and you need Elon Musk to engage with you. Have you heard from Musk? Have you heard from Tesla since you published this?
We have not heard from them. I'm optimistic that he will, in fact, read it. I'm not optimistic that we're going to get an apology. In other words, I'd be surprised if we get an apology. But I do think he is going to slow down, and I am willing to bet that his behavior on Twitter is going to change going forward.
How optimistic are you, given the reporting, some of it coming from my Bloomberg colleagues, about what is happening in that tent, how they are working to get production underway and meet the targets that he has set out for Tesla, many of which they have already missed? But do you think they can get it together and meet some of these production goals before the end of the year, or not? Is he too distracted?
He's not too distracted. He needs to. That's the irony of this, is that by him tweeting this stuff out, it gives a perception that he's distracted. I think, in fact, the company is making measurable progress. That 5,000 a week number, that probably at the end of June wasn't sustainable. I think that they really had to throw everything that they had to get that across the line. You're probably going to see a greater loss than expected for the June quarter because of the amount that they had to spend to get to that. But if you look at the production numbers that in the exiting, the average production number Model 3 in the March quarter was about 650 per week. It was about 2,300 per week in the June quarter, and we think it will be 4,000 a week in the September quarter. So we think they're making the appropriate progress there, and this is one step. I think them figuring out a more efficient way to build cars faster and more profitable, I think, lays the foundation for other models, and I think that they are making the right progress against that target.
Should Musk stop tweeting full stop?
No. I think that he has a way to engage with customers through Twitter. I think what needs to stop is just ignore the shorts. You start to engage with the shorts, you're going to lose that battle. Focus on the production side. And I think anything out of bounds, like we saw more recently, clearly, that's the stuff that needs to stop. But he can tweet all he wants to about, for example, the things that they're doing to improve the production, albeit if it's focused on the right piece of really advancing their mission. So I think there's still a place for him to do it. I think he needs to take a break in the near term, though.
Gene Munster, Loop Ventures, on his open letter to Elon Musk. We'll be watching the tweets, Gene, for reaction. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. From San Francisco, I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.